Goeiedag and welcome. My name is Amarinske and today I will bring you my January wrap-up. I had in mind to not really film those anymore, but since I somehow managed to read 18 books this month, I thought a wrap-up was due. And 18 books for me is really a lot for a month, even though 11 of those were manga, because that means that 7 were regular books. And normally 5 books in a month is already a lot for me, but let's get started with the books I read. So the first book I finished in January was Das Buch van Eden by Kai Meijer. And since I listened to it on audiobook, I don't really have a physical copy anywhere. And I also cannot really find like a picture or so of it, so I cannot insert it. But it's a story like the title says. Das Buch van Eden means the Book of Eden. It's a historical fiction set somewhere in or around the Middle Ages, in which a girl comes to a monastery when she's attacked, and it turns out she has the lost living plant with her from the Garden of Eden. And she needs to bring it back to the Garden of Eden, and she's the only one who can take care of it. But she has to bring it there because otherwise the plant will die. And from that moment on, like an adventure type story ensues. It's kind of YA type story, but it was really fun to read or listen to. I enjoyed it very much when I got finally into it, which took a while. And yeah, I believe I gave it 4 stars, but I don't know the exact rating anymore because it's more than a month ago. Now we go on to some physical books. The first one I finished after this, this was a combination of I physically read this as well as listened to the audiobook because it was slow at points and the audiobook really helped get me through it. The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. This is also a historical fiction. It's set in, I believe, late 17th century, at least, 1686, in the Netherlands, Amsterdam, and we have the owner of a VOC ship, so East Indian Trading Company ship, who marries an 18-year-old girl, but the man in question is like 40 years or so or older, and he only marries because his sister said he should. And from that she gets like a miniature version of the house she gets to furnish from her husband and that kind of stuff. And we get some kind of a little magical twist through the Miniaturist, which is not really resolved at the end, but all in all, I like this. I heard a lot of people I read this sort of with because it was part of a quarterly book club, partly organized by G from Book Roast. And a lot of people had a lot of aspects they did not like the characters were not really a lot developed, and it was slow at times, and they complained about not liking the parts about the sugar in this book so much. And I actually quite enjoyed it. I don't really mind all those details that seem pointless, because in part I was interested in this book for the historical perspective, because I did not really know a lot about that VOC era and how it truly went, and I think this portrayed it relatively realistically from what I knew. It is a fiction, but then again, it feels like it is kind of true. And in the end, there is like a list of what people in certain groups of the society earned a year and how much certain things cost. And that way you could see that those people really truly were extremely rich, which made it way more believable with the stuff they bought. And this story is also based on this, which is a true cabinet house from Nella Ootman, which is the main character in this book. Who is the main character in this book. So that was a really fun thing to discover because I did not know beforehand that the actual main character has truly lived in the 17th century. So all in all, I enjoyed this. I believe I gave it like just below 4 stars in rating. But I don't really know any more. But after that I went on to this tiny little book. It's called Weihnachtsoratorium by Anke Kranendonk. It might have the title of a German song. I don't know which German composer wrote it, either Bach or Mozart. I don't know, but it starts off with a group of people in a choir singing this musical composition. Song is really an understatement from how I hear it described. It's really hard to sing and play. But we get like a little short story into the family life of the main character, and like a husband and wife fighting because the man walks away without even giving a reason why. He just went home. And it was interesting, but I did not think it was actually really good. I don't mind having read it because it's so tiny and did not really take a lot of time. But if I come across someone who is Dutch, I would not recommend this book because there is so many great Dutch literature out there, and this does not belong to the great Dutch literature. It's just a fun little story. Then I go on to another historical fiction, Wars of the Roses, Stormbird by Connie Gulden. This is part 1 of a quartet called The Wars of the Roses, which, as it said, is based on the Wars of the Roses, like the English-French wars in the 15th century in Europe. There's also the history part where, not Lord of the Rings, but A Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire is based on the same wars. And I thought it would be interesting to read a piece of fiction based on the actual true events instead of fantasy first, before I decided to dive headfirst into a big high fantasy series that's not even completed yet. But I have to say, this was a little bit of a letdown. And just like The Miniaturist, I read a part of this physically and I also listened to it on audiobook. And it was a letdown because mostly the writing style, and at points it was really confusing who was actually telling, like which perspective was telling the story at that point. And it looks really big, but the font is also really big. Like it is a nice portrayal of history because of course history is never really simple, but I mean it was okay. And I don't think I will go on with the rest of the quartet, or at least I will not go on with it soon because this was not really a gem for me. And then I read Platinum End, volume 3 and 4. And I like this just as much as volume 1 and 2. I almost regret not rereading volume 1 and 2 before reading this, because this is really a complex story. It's about angels coming down to Earth after God decides either he wants to die or doesn't want to be God anymore. And those 14 angels are looking for new God candidates so they can find a new God. And the new God candidates come from people who have lost the will to live. And the story goes on from there. But this has these books not particularly, but it has like, the series has graphic murder and like sex scenes and such. So, but I was still in the end kind of surprised that this is rated for a mature audience when something like Tokyo Ghoul that is a lot more gory, or even Death Note, is rated for a YA audience, like older teen. I'm kind of surprised by that, because this seems to be a lot more tame than the other series. Oh yeah, this is written by Tsugumi Oba and Takeshi Obata. This series is the same authors as Death Note. So they do not disappoint at all. This is great. Now we go on with Hex, that I also physically read in part and listened to on audiobook. I mean, I got a lot of free audiobooks, so why not listen to them, right? And this was creepy. So fucking creepy. Like some witch that randomly appears anywhere, and that can also be on the foot of your bed in the middle of the night, or like somewhere in your house when you're not home, or just behind you when you're cooking your dinner. And it was just fun. Thomas Oldeheuvelt has written it nicely, and it had like Dutch humor and references in it that almost only Dutch people will get. That's why he actually rewrote the whole backstory of the witch and the setting for the English translation. The English translation is set somewhere in the Hudson River, where this is set in a rural area just next to a national park in the Netherlands. It's set close to Nijmegen, which is close to the Veluwe, or one of the few things that is somewhat like a national park we have here in the Netherlands. So you get like that rural view, but close to a city. The people cannot leave, they are like damned to stay in a place forever. And our story starts with, or sort of starts with, people wanting to like terrorize that witch a little bit, but also with a new couple coming into city and discovering that they can never leave. The back says that a video goes viral, but that actually did not happen in the book. There is not some viral video, but there is a YouTuber in here, which is really fun to read, because for the time it is written in, actually all the YouTube facts about monetization and popularity and such, they were right. Which is, I don't know how old Thomas Oldeheuvelt is, but a lot of people who are not into actually filming videos on YouTube don't really know how it works, but this was executed well on that point as well. And I enjoyed the creepiness. It took a little bit for me to actually feel creepy, but when it felt creepy, it only got darker. The end was a little bit strange, but also like thought-provoking in some way, so I'll definitely recommend anyone to read this one if you get a chance. The English version is also called Hex, so that will be really easy to find. And I need to go on because my battery is almost dead. And I will now go on with the manga Geo by Junji Ito. This is very weird. The tagline is "The death stench creeps." And it was just strange. I definitely don't like this one best. I have read all the 3 mangas he created, and the one I like best I think was Uzumaki, but this is about a death stench, so death fish and stuff creep on land on some strange mechanical thing, and they seem to follow our main characters, and then from that on, like an apocalypse ensues, something like that. And apparently it stings, which goes on for like months and months and months, and a lot of people get killed. I will not spoil more, but I mean, that's what happens in an apocalypse, right? It's just creepy and gory and strange. And I don't have a lot more to say about it. I was sort of engrossed in it, but also not that much. I think I would not reread it, But if you're into horror manga, I would definitely recommend checking out Junji Ito, because he has only created like 3 mangas. This one, Gyo, Tomi, and Uzumaki. And they are all kind of creepy and strange and weird. And you don't always expect what's happening, which is also good. And this has a little scientific twist to it as well, which was fun, because the scientific twist actually was correct biologically, which I always appreciate. And let's go on to my next read. I had The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, but I don't really have opinions on that, and I only had that one in audiobook anyway. So I'm not going to talk about that one a lot because I don't really have an opinion on it, and it's a little bit... It felt like a glorified self-help book with a fun story in it, and that's what it was. And now we go to the next thing, which is volume 7 to 14 of Tokyo Ghoul by... Oh, it's upside down. By Sui Ishida. And whoa, a lot of stuff happens. The twist at the end was kind of sad, and I get why people don't like it. So be warned that if you want to read these, this has an open ending in part, and it's not a nice open ending. I will not spoil, of course, what it is, but in these volumes so many things happen. So many things happen. I could barely stop reading. So I was happy I had all 8 of them. And now on to my last book, because my battery is no longer dying, but actually almost dead. And the last book I read was, and finished because I started reading that like September or something, is Black